Well, we are the Center for Spiritual Living Los Angeles, and welcome to our Sunday celebration service. We're a metaphysical New Thoughts community, a spiritual community that welcomes all facets of life and all aspects of life into our spiritual home here at 1200 North La Brea Avenue. Let's take a moment and just feel ourselves anchored in our home. So whether you're here in person today, or if you're watching us online, let's say hello to those watching us online, or watching at a later date. Today we come together, as we do every Sunday, to celebrate the vision statement for our community, which is supporting individuals finding their personal self-empowerment through a spiritual awakening. Just forgot that last word. I'll say that again. Our vision statement is supporting individuals finding their personal self-empowerment through a spiritual awakening. What that means is that we honor each of you on your path and the journey of your awakening to the power of the divine that resides within each of us. So today, if you're here for the first time, you may hear some terminology that's new to you, that's non-traditionally Christian in its way. You will hear us speak of affirmative prayer or spiritual mind treatment, which is an affirmation and a declaration of honoring the oneness of life that exists within each and every one of us, that we both experience and express it through our thoughts, our beliefs, our actions, and our reactions with life itself. We honor as sentient beings that one power that exists equally among all other sentient beings, which we know as an indwelling presence. We practice primarily here the teaching of the science of mind in its most modern incarnation, which is known as a philosophy, a faith, and a way of life. We welcome and celebrate all races, all religions, all countries of origins, all sexual orientations, all genders, all ethnicities, all abilities, all people. We stand with you, we honor you, we acknowledge you, and we celebrate the oneness that exists within you just as it does each one of us. And as our beloved founder, Dr. David Walker, used to say each and every Sunday morning, we welcome one and we welcome all. So with that, we kick off the next phase of our service this morning with a ritual. And that ritual takes place, it's a participatory opportunity for each of us to not only go deeper within and honor the oneness that exists among all of us, but it's facilitated by our practitioner of the day, which is Tim Barber, who will join us on the bema in just a moment. And our illuminator for the day is Dennis Goodine. Happy belated birthday to Dennis. I believe it was yesterday or the day before. So we're going to celebrate it right now. Happy birthday to him. And it's an opportunity for you to hear spiritual mind treatment, to do a little call and response musical component that goes with that. And Tim will be doing the flames of faith, or the religions today, to honor the Jewish New Year kicking off today. So I invite you to hear this anew today. Allow yourself to go deep within and honor the oneness of life that is you. I present to you Tim Barber.
Please join us.
Calling in the light, calling in the light, calling in the light of love, calling in the light, calling in the light, in the light of love.
Today we perform this ceremony to promote the universal consciousness of life, which acknowledges all peoples and all faiths. All sentient beings come from one great universal presence, which we call spirit. Fundamental to this truth is the unifying nature of all religious thought and all religious experience, which we honor here today. The first candle this morning we light for the Tao, honoring the universal path of harmony and equilibrium, the natural way. The second candle is illuminated for the shamanic traditions, honoring the beliefs and practices of all indigenous peoples, the way of primal spirituality. We light the third candle for Hinduism, honoring the path of knowledge, action, and devotion. The fourth candle is lit for Judaism, honoring the ethical path and living by sacred law. We light the fifth candle for all forms of Buddhism, honoring the Four Noble Truths and the path of compassion. The sixth candle we light for all forms of Christianity, honoring the Christ consciousness, also known as the path of love. We light the seventh candle for all forms of Islam, honoring the path of submission to the will of God as the highest calling. We light the eighth candle for the universalistic religion of the Baha'i, honoring the path of unity and peace. We light the ninth candle for all forms of New Thought, honoring the metaphysical path of mental healing through the path of universal spiritual principles. As we light the 10th candle, the healing candle, we ask you to take a moment and think of anyone you would like silently to put in the light of healing flame to experience the eternal and everlasting love of the divine.
I am love, I am peace in my heart, I am free, I am spirit,
I am spirit.
I am soul, all together we are whole, calling in the light, calling in the light, calling in the light of love. Calling in the light, calling in the light, calling in the light of love. Calling in the light of love.
And so it is, and so it is, and so it is.
Please join me in a spiritual mind treatment. Let's begin by knowing that there is one thing going on, one divine plan, one protocol, one system, one way of working that takes our thoughts and produces our experience like a harvest. And today, as the close of summer approaches, we look at our harvest, our city, our home, our center for spiritual living, our friendships, our family, our bodies, our minds, and we are grateful. We recognize the harvest of all the good work we've done. We hold it gently and release it into the lives and arms and hearts of all other people everywhere. Gratefully, we know that this is how it works. We accept it, we celebrate it, and together we say, so it is.
I know it felt a little odd to applaud in that moment because the energy, the vibration had changed to such a low frequency, right? So maybe going forward, we can just, I won't cause you to applaud and we can just feel the energy for a second, but we can go back into that field. It was so beautiful to stand in the back, and I had you all on Facebook Live and people were tuning in, and it was interesting because I thought when it came to spiritual mind treatment, should I cut it off? Is that a private moment? But I thought, no, if we're here to share what we have in the world, there's nothing to cut off, to simply to honor that and revel in it and celebrate it. But in talking this month on Change Your Vibration, Change Your Life, I got to witness, as I'm sure each and every one of you did, the literal melodic change in vibration as the music took us on this journey, and then the energy in the room changed, and then the illuminating of the candles and the rhythm of Tim reading the ritual, which was so beautiful. Thank you, Tim. And then his spiritual mind treatment equal. And then the way that you took us on the journey, all of you, with musically. And then you came in with the saxophone, which caught Tim by surprise, but yet it changed the whole vibration, all of it being good. And I'm going to speak more about that today, of how our role in finding our personal self-empowerment through a spiritual awakening is opening up to the awareness of the multiplicity of what's going on vibrationally to us in life. So you'll hear more about that later. So I'm sure that you agree, and I'm going to assume that you agree with me, that so far what we've experienced musically has been quite wonderful this morning, right? Of course, I love having these three gentlemen here, but this woman is a piece of my heart. And you guys have heard me say before, we kind of fell in love with each other at the Parliament of World Religions now 8 years ago in Melbourne, Australia, as not only I got to sing with the Agape Choir, which was an experience all unto itself, but we were like in a holding room in the back for quite some time. And let's just say that we were a bit devious. How about that? So our divinity got expressed in some wonderful ways. Would you agree with that?
Thankfully, there was no YouTube back then.
Thankfully, there was not any YouTube right now. But there is today, and thank God you're here, and thank God you express both your deviousness and your divinity through your music. I'm so happy to share with you again today Arnaé Batson and the boys.
In my life, it's gonna feel real good, gonna make a difference, gonna make it right. As I turn up the collar on my favorite winter coat, this wind is blowing my mind. I see the kids in the street with not enough to eat. Who am I to be blind, pretending not to see their needs? A summer's disregard, they follow each other on the wind, 'cause they got nowhere to go. That's why I want you to know, I'm starting with the man in the mirror. I'm asking him to change his ways, and no message could have been any clearer. If you want to make the world a better chance, to look at yourself and then make a change. Yes. Na 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 na. Yes, I've been a victim of a selfish kind of love. It's time, it's blowing my mind. This young with no home, not a nickel alone. Could it be really me, pretending not to see they're alone? A widow deeply scarred, somebody's broken heart, and a washed out dream. They follow the pattern of the wind, you see, 'cause they got no place to be. That's why I'm starting with me. I'm starting with the man in the mirror, yeah. And I'm asking him to change his ways. And no message could have been any clearer. If you want to make the world a better place, take a look at yourself and then make a change. I'm starting with the one in the mirror, yes. And I'm I'm asking me to change my ways. And no message could have been any clearer. If you want to make the world a better place, take a look at yourself and then make that change. I'm starting with the woman in the mirror. I'm asking her to change her way. Could have been any clearer. If you want to make the world a better place, take a look at yourself and then make the change. You gotta get it right while you got the time, because when you close your heart, then you close your mind. Yeah, 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 the mirror, and I'm asking her to change her ways. And no message could have been any clearer. If you want to make the world a better place, come on, y'all. If you want to make the world a better place, if you want to make the world a better place, take a look at yourself and make the change. If you want to make the world a better place, take a look at yourself and make the change. If you want to make the world a better place, take a look at yourself and make that, and make that, and make that, and make that, and make that change.
Yes. Step up, take your bow. Take your bow, yes. Fantastic. Don't you love sometimes how just, I believe in traditional Christian terminology. Terminology is the Lord works in mysterious ways. Well, the Lord did this morning. Yes. You've all just showed up this morning with Guy. And Guy's like, my buddy's here and he's with me and he plays the saxophone. And I'm like, does he want to play? He goes, yes. So he wanted to come share his stuff. So thank you. Ooh, woo. I know I was standing back there and what was wrestling through my mind was, they're stepping on my speaking time, and that's okay. I could take this in forever. So it's all good, girl. It's all good. So what you were just singing about is make the change is exactly what I'm speaking of this much, which is the theme is change your vibration, change your life. I want to begin by taking us back to the quote that I used last week and we'll use throughout this much, which is from Albert Einstein, which is every single thing is energy and that's all there is to it. Match the frequency of the reality that you want and you cannot help but get that reality. It can be no other way. I'm going to say it again. I want you to hear it and then I'll tell you the last piece. Everything is energy. We felt it this morning. And that's all there is to it. Match the frequency of the reality you want and you cannot help but get that reality. It can be no other way, for this is not philosophy. It's physics. Albert tells us it's not philosophy, it's physics. Change your vibrations, change your life. Last week I talked about it, and if you weren't here, I'm going to paraphrase a little bit of it and recap a little, but you can also watch it online through our YouTube channel, is that I'm playing off the concept of change your thinking, change your life, letting the 20th century model of change your thinking, change your life be enough for the 21st century, but in the 21st century, we know that it's more than just your thinking. Doesn't mean that you don't just change it's not that you don't change your thinking. That's in addition to changing your thinking, there is more to do, and this is what that means. As described by Cassandra Sturdy, she addresses this concept of the vibration. Your vibration, let's just feel it for a moment, your vibration is a fancy way of describing your overall state of being. Everything in the universe is made up of energy vibrating at different frequencies. Even things that look solid are made up of vibrational energy fields at the quantum level. This includes you, and it includes me. From a scientific and metaphysical perspective, Sturdy explains that we are a being that is made up of different energy levels: physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. Take that in for a minute. You're made up of different energy levels, which is physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. And each of these levels has a vibrational frequency which combine to create your overall vibration of being. Now, all vibrations operate at a high and a low frequency within us and around us. If your vibration is low, it will be evident. It's simply a matter of bringing awareness to your situation and then working on rectifying it. Ernest Holmes talks about vibrations in this way. Each being is an individual entity in mind, the wholeness of mind, the oneness of the universe. Each being is an individual entity in mind is known by the name he or she bears. On a side note, if you want to learn more about names, watch the CBS Sunday morning show that was on this morning. There was a whole segment about the person has an energy, it's not the word they use, but when they're given a name and that name has an energy that comes with it and it stays with them the rest of their life and impacts, and on some levels it says predicts the life that they're going to have. Really not a new concept if you look at what David Hawkins says, says, but oftentimes people will both change their name, and obviously we know we can change our life. But I'm going to back up. Each being as an individual entity in mind is known by the name he or she bears. Now, the reason that that's the case is because every time we hear our name, our consciousness responds to that. Consciousness being the operative word here. And so he says, is the name he or she bears, and by the vibration which they emanate, they express. For while we are all one in mind or spirit, each has a separate and individualized personality. Now we know that because Holmes told us that by my favorite Ernest Holmes quote of all times, which we used to hear with Dr. Walker and was at the place we used to go on Wilshire Boulevard, and it was this: Spirit has placed the stamp of individuality upon itself and called it you. True, yes. However, that you emanates a vibrational frequency that's personal to you. And we all know that because we feel the energy of the individuals when we encounter them. We also feel them when we come together collectively. Correct? Why is that? That is because Holmes goes on to tells us that the vibration that we're talking about, the wholeness, if you will, of the energy field of that which includes our spiritual, our mental, our emotional, and our physical, is the law of life in execution. What he's telling us is that this vibration that comes from us, the wholeness of our being, is the law of life in execution. In other words, it's that energy that's emanating from us the minute it becomes real within us. And it's always real within us. And so that which we express, not simply by words, but just the being that we are, emanates from us, and that is an example of the law of life in execution. So what we're talking today is about then changing our vibration. Well, can we change our vibration? Absolutely we can. Why? Because we already learned in the 20th century we can change our thinking and change our life. This is saying that we can change more than just our thinking. We can change our physicality, our emotionality, our mentality, and our spirituality from the perspective. We can't change who we are as spiritual beings, but we can for certain change our awareness of who we are as spiritual beings. I believe that each and every one of you in here today is here because on some level you have indeed changed your awareness of who you are as a spiritual being. Would you agree with that? Yes, and in so doing, the vibrational frequency that you emanate has indeed also changed ultimately impacting life itself, bringing back to you an experience of life that is reflective of that change that you consciously engaged in, and you experience life at a level higher than you did before. The thing that's important for us to know is that that doesn't have to be just a one-time experience, that we each have the opportunity to make that change everlasting. I'm going to talk about that this morning, but that takes work. Change is what we're talking about. Well, how is change defined? In its traditional sense, it's defined as making or becoming different. The second component of that is to take or use another instead of. A synonym for change is to make a shift in life. So a shift. Now these definitions are very elementary, to say the least. To make or become different. What we're talking about is to make or become different our emotionality, our mentality, our spirituality, and our physicality. And in so doing, we are changing the wholeness that is our vibrational field of life itself. Elementary, of course, but it's important for us to be reminded of that. Well, where else in life do we see change that is infinite and ever occurring? Well, in nature, of course. Are we one with nature? Absolutely. Does the same law of life exist for us that it does for nature? Of course it is. Well, what makes us different then? Our ability to choose. That's what makes us different. Nature in and of itself does not have the capacity to choose. The tree doesn't have the capacity to choose when it drops the pine cone. The seed doesn't have the capacity to choose to know when it emerges through the ground and becomes the plant, ultimately becoming the fruit. Heather K. O'Hara addresses this regarding change and nature. Change knelt down beside me in the wilderness, and in the gentlest voice I've ever heard, she said, I love being the reason for all your beginnings. Then she kissed the tears from my eyes, stood up, and reached for my hand. I want you to hear that again. Change knelt down beside me in the wilderness. And in the gentlest voice I've ever heard, she said, I love being the reason for all of your beginnings. Then she kissed the tears from my eyes, stood up, and reached for my hand, meaning she walked with you and me each and every step of the journey of life itself. And along each and every step of the journey of life, change is inherent. It's inherent. Change your vibrations, change your frequency, change your life. The change is inherent. However, what we have, unlike every other aspect of life, as I said before, is the ability to choose how we want to show up in that change. Now, you guys have heard this quote that I'm going to give you right now, which is a mantra by which I live by, and I use it all the time in my ministry and many of my talks, and it's by Gary Zukav from the book, The Seat of the Soul. And I'll tell you some great stories about that at some other point. It's amazing. But it's this choice. Our ability to choose is the engine of our evolution. If you choose unconsciously, you will evolve unconsciously. If you choose consciously, you will evolve consciously. Choosing to evolve consciously is much better than unconsciously, and most often far less painful. He goes on to write, trust me, been there, done that. And then he goes on to write, the power of choice. This is my favorite part, and I love the other. The power of choice is the greatest gift you've been given, second only to the gift of life itself. Makes me want to cry. Take that part in. The power of choice is the greatest gift you've been given, second only to the gift of life itself. What he's talking about here is that living as a being of nature, understanding that evolution is taking place around us, through us, in us, and as us, that we have the opportunity to participate in that by using the thing that we have that's the second best gift in life, period, second only to life itself, and that's our ability to choose. And by choosing, what we get to step into is a term called conscious evolution. To not just evolve by nature, but to evolve consciously, to step into conscious evolution. And in other words, by stepping into conscious evolution, we have the opportunity to consciously participate in the evolutionary process of our vibrational frequency rising higher and higher and higher. You know, in our teaching, what we know that means is that by it rising higher and higher and higher, we are aligning ourselves with our inherent divinity of peace, power, beauty, joy, light, life, love, and wisdom that we use as the qualities of God. But there are many other teachers that give us other components of that. It's believed that Buddha and Allah and Jesus and Yahweh all vibrated at the highest frequency possible, and that we have the opportunity and the capacity to each vibrate at that frequency as well. However, that can only take place through purpose and intention. Conscious evolution refers to the ability of the human species to choose what the species, Homo sapiens, becomes in the future, based on recent advancements in science, medicine, technology, psychology, sociology, and spirituality. Hear that again and ask yourself, are you a participant in conscious evolution? Because conscious evolution, as a term, refers to the ability of the human species, that's us, to choose what our species, the Homo sapiens, become in the future based on recent advancements in science, medicine, technology, psychology, sociology, and spirituality. Now, where do you think there is a place that there's a convergence of science, technology, psychology, sociology, and spirituality? I don't know about you, but my goal is that on Sunday mornings at 10 a.m. at 1200 North La Brea, there's a convergence of that. That it's my intention that there's a convergence of that every time I wake up in the morning. It's my intention that when we come together as a community, whether it's Monday through Friday or Saturday and Sunday or all of those combined, 365 days a year, that with purpose and intention and commitment, we are engaging in an understanding and an awareness of, and a higher vibrational frequency of merging science, technology, psychology, sociology, and spirituality. And in so doing, we are changing our vibration and indeed changing our lives, not just individually, but collectively, and not just collectively in this room, but collectively as the species known as Homo sapiens. It's who we are. It's who we are. And as beings who have agreed to, whether we're aware that we've agreed to or not, to participate in our spiritual awakening, ultimately being part of the causation of personal self-empowerment. We are required from that perspective, by making that commitment, to stay engaged in a greater understanding of what's taking place with science, technology, psychology, sociology, and spirituality, ultimately being conscious participants in conscious evolution. So I'm going to, baby, hallelujah. So I'm going to read to you a writing about conscious evolution, because I know that I remember the first time I heard about conscious evolution in the early 2000s at an AG&T conference. And I couldn't hang out in the room enough to learn about it, because I think it's a really mystical and magical and also practical way to live life. And here's how it's addressed by Andrew Z. Cohen, not Andy Cohen from Watch What Happens Live. It's this. This is long, so take it in. For most of us, spiritual evolution does not occur simply as a result of one flash of insight or revelation. On the contrary, it usually requires inspired intention and consistent, diligent effort. And the way this is achieved is through the greatest gift that evolution has given us, the power of choice, the power of conscious choice, or free agency. Is unique to human beings as far as we know. You and I are highly evolved, individuated selves who have been blessed with the extraordinary capacity for self-reflective awareness and the freedom to choose. In fact, these are the very faculties that make it possible for us to consciously evolve. Think about it. You, whoever you are, at least to some degree, have the power to choose. How much do you really appreciate the significance of this extraordinary birthright? It is surprising how few people consider the deeper implications of possessing the freedom to choose. Hear that again. It's surprising how few people, probably each one of us at some point, each and every day, we don't consider the deep implications of possessing the freedom to choose. Just imagine, he writes, without free agency, who would you be? Little more than a robot, unconsciously responding and reacting to conditioned egoic fears and desires, cultural triggers, biological impulses, and external stimuli, with no control over your destiny. But while it is true that we are all profoundly influenced by many of these forces, both inner and outer, at the same time, it is equally true that we always have at least some measure of freedom to choose how we respond. If you aspire to become an evolutionary, enlightened human being, I'm assuming you all do. If you aspire to become, I don't assume, I know you do because you're here. If you aspire to become an evolutionary, I'm going to say it again, evolutionarily enlightened human being. Don't you love the sound of that? An evolutionarily enlightened human being. Your ability to do so depends upon accepting the single and simple fact that independent of external circumstances, you always have a measure of freedom to choose. It's a big statement, don't you think? Yeah. That's a big statement all unto itself. I'll read it again. Because you aspire to become an evolutionarily enlightened human being, your ability to do so depends upon accepting the simple and single fact that independent of external circumstances, you always have a measure of freedom to choose. That sounds like a simple statement, but it's amazing how many intelligent people will deny it. When you look honestly for yourself, however, you will see that it's true. Take that in for a second, that it's true. Because you're always choosing. Sometimes your choices are conscious, sometimes they're unconscious. Sometimes they are inspired by the best parts of yourself. Other times they are motivated by lower impulses and instincts. But the bottom line is that every time you act or react, at some level a choice is being made. And you, whoever you are the one who is making that choice. After all, who else could it be? He goes on to write that conscious evolution is a simple concept to grasp, but not quite as simple to put into practice. Would you agree with that? Yeah. Why? Because we have the freedom to choose. That's why, all right? He goes on to say, our freedom to choose is not unlimited. We have some measure of freedom, not complete freedom, but a measure. And that measure is greater for some people than it is for others, based on their awareness and the circumstances in which they live. I added that part. But as long as there is some, it's enough to begin. If there is a measure of freedom, then there is freedom to choose. What that means is that in relationship to the important choices you make, you are never completely unconscious. There is always some degree of awareness, however small, which gives you the freedom to choose. And the path of conscious evolution is about increasing that degree of awareness, increasing that measure of freedom until you are living as the enlightened self that you consciously choose to be, rather than the unenlightened self you have unconsciously and habitually identified with your entire life. When your power of choice aligns itself with the evolutionary impulse in this way, your own deepest, heartfelt, spiritual aspiration becomes one with the original cosmic intention to create the universe. That's what evolutionary enlightenment is pointing to. To the degree to which you become conscious and transcend these outdated biological, psychological, and cultural habits within yourself that are inhibiting your higher development, you become an ever more powerful agent for conscious evolution. Thank you, Andrew. Right? Now, the last part of this that I love is that when your power of choice aligns itself with the evolutionary impulse in this way. Do you remember when I talked about the evolutionary impulse, the impulse of the divine that is waiting within you, rising up to make itself known, was last month when we spoke about fulfilling life's desires. What we're being told here is that we are being called forth to be an agent for conscious evolution, and the way to do that is to align our consciousness with the nature of nature, allowing the impulse of life itself within us to rise up, to get our own conscious mind out of the way, to let our divine being rise up through us, and as it comes up, then consciously choose to express more of it out into the world. In other words, by living our divinity consciously, we are then being an evolutionary agent on this planet, and in so doing, impacting life itself. Now, if you think about it, this beloved center known as the Los Angeles Church of Religious Science that started almost 30 years ago, its vision statement, even though it wasn't called that at a time, was making a difference. Making a difference. And the reality is that we're all called here to do that. That's why we show up on Sunday mornings. That's why we've said yes to being students of this teaching. That's why we've said yes to being a practitioner. That's why we've said yes to being a minister. That's why we've said yes to giving our good in the universe, because we understand that it's the nature of nature, the innate nature of the divine within us to rise up, to meet us where we have the second greatest gift, which is the gift of choice, and then to express through us and as us the first greatest gift that we've been given, which is life itself from a conscious perspective. And in so doing, what then emanates from us is a high vibrational frequency, a higher dimension of consciousness, if you will, that is then evoking a vibrational frequency that must impact the world, and in so doing returns to us multiplied abundantly, and the cycle continues. And we get to choose whether that cycle continues upward on a frequency level or not. Lao Tzu in the Tao writes, the key to growth is the introduction of higher dimensions of consciousness into our awareness. But it doesn't stop at our awareness. Our awareness isn't enough. It isn't enough anymore to just know that you are the power and the presence of the infinite nature of God itself. It's important for us to know that, yes, we are here to know it, to be it, but then to consciously express it. To consciously express it. It's important for us to know that your thoughts determine your vibrations and your frequencies. And your vibrations and your frequency and your feelings tell you immediately what frequency you're on. When you feel bad, you're on a frequency of drawing in more things that are known as bad or not life-affirming. But when you feel good about life itself, you're powerfully attracting more good things, not only to you, but through you. Michael Bernard Beckwith says that a thought that emanates from an awareness of love, the self-givingness of spirit whose desire is to create more of itself out of itself, and the only way that it can do that is through you and through me, and connectivity, then in fact living from that place of the interconnectedness of life itself, right, is way more powerful than a thought form that's emanating from a sense of separation and fear. Now, the only way that we can allow that emanation to take place from awareness of love and connectivity is through choosing that that's what's coming forth from us and not fear. That can only take place when we're conscious and awake. And we just learned from Gary Zukav, by being conscious and awake, we're consciously participating in conscious evolution. In other words, giving way to life that is far less painful than the other way. And yet, what we know is that we don't have to live a life that has pain at all in it. Is that we can live a life that's filled with joy and beauty and peace and power. And yet, pain is still going to show up. But when it shows up, we meet it with peace and power and joy and light and life and love. Why? Because we have the capacity to be agents for change. That takes place by choosing how we express our divine nature through our humanity. And so today I invite you to take a moment, each and every moment that you remember to do so over this next week, and ask yourself, When I look at the man or the human or the woman in the mirror, am I committing for that being to be an agent of change, to live from a place of an evolutionary consciousness, and in so doing, changing the vibration of my being and releasing it out into the universe that's making a difference without any judgment or guilt or celebration? Just simply letting it be that it is. And in so doing, then you draw back into your field of awareness and experience of life itself more of that which you are. It doesn't have to be difficult. It doesn't have to be hard. In fact, it can be quite easy, but what it requires for all of us is to change our vibrational frequency by changing our thinking, by changing the consciousness that we hold on to, by changing knowing at a deep level who you are. And who you are is indeed the power and the presence of God, and then acting accordingly. Have a great Sunday. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.